Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
True Destiny by OldWineNewBottles. The Straw Hat Pirates have finally achieved all their hopes and dreams after finding the One Piece. But after receiving a disturbing letter, Nami must return home to find her missing sister. Luffy and the others insist on going with her. The group faces their biggest challenge yet and discovers that their true destinies are yet to be uncovered. Luffy x Nami. Big shout out to the warlords of this channel: Native Warrior, Claude Lifrace, Neo Wesker 23, Derek Dowdy, Zazu Sayaz, Abdul Raf Ali, N3WT, What If Lord, Black Money Young Leon, Garrick Russell, Ben Brownlee, Case Clark, Tristan Ward, KSG PL4YZ, Brian McKenzie. You know who you are. Want to stand with them? Join the channel membership and show your support. Adios. Tontops.
A disturbing letter. Nami. The boy in the straw hat screamed at the top of his lungs as he stood on the pile of rubble that once was Arlong Park. "You're my nakama." The memory echoed in her mind as she stared down at the unfinished map she had been working on for the past week. Nami sighed quietly to herself so as not to let any of her other crewmates overhear. It had been years since she joined the Straw Hat Pirates. After what they did to save her and her village, she was only too happy to become their navigator. Over the time spent at sea, they had sailed all over the world, from East Blue to West, North to South, and even went in the Grand Line and came out again with the world's greatest treasure, One Piece. In fact, it wasn't a treasure made of gold, silver, or precious gems. It was Gold Roger's personal captain's hat that he had somehow combined his own spirit with. Gold Roger's spirit only spoke to the first person to touch it, who ended up being none other than Monkey D. Luffy. He was now the rightful heir to the title of King of the Pirates. The One Piece might not have been something that was worth money, but besides that, Gold Roger had left a mountain of gold and other precious metals and gems along with it on the distant island of Raftel. The Straw Hat Pirates were the richest men and women in the world. Now that they were done with that, Luffy's next goal was to find his mentor, Red Shanks. Word on the wind was that he had disappeared after a fierce battle with the Sea King and everyone thought him to be dead, but Luffy, being Luffy, refused to believe it. Now that he had the One Piece, and a mountain of treasure, he was absolutely sure that he would find Red Shanks somewhere out on the vast ocean. In fact, everyone in the crew had achieved their dreams. Zoro defeated the man who was considered to be the greatest swordsman in the world, Dracule, Hawkeyes, Mihawk, who had at one point been a mentor to the green-haired swordsman. Sanji found the All Blue, where the East, West, North and South Blues met, and had the cooking extravaganza of his life. Usopp had had countless adventures that he could tell to anyone who would listen, and he had found his courage to stand up to any challenges that would come his way. Chopper had found peace within himself, being a talking reindeer and all, and he had also become a world-famous doctor following in his mentor, Dr. Hiruluke's footsteps. Robin found many of the answers that she had been looking for about the mysterious past of the One Piece in the Rio Poneglyph, and upon the Straw Hat Pirates' arrival to the island of Raftel, she was able to uncover the true mystery surrounding the poneglyphs and the history of the Grand Line. Frankie, having already fulfilled his dream of creating a prized pirate ship that could withstand any trial, was content to stay on the Thousand Sunny as a Straw Hat pirate and tend to his beloved treasure of a ship. Brook's goal was fulfilled when the Straw Hats reunited with Laboon, the monstrous whale of the Grand Line. Brook was finally able to fulfill his promise to his dead comrades and played their final song they had sung together for the whale on the tone dial that Brook had kept safe. Everyone's dreams had been fulfilled. Everyone's except Nami's. Her dream would require much more time. A lifetime, to be exact. She wanted to draw a map of the entire world. As much as she had traveled with the Straw Hat Pirates, they had not even come close to exploring all of the vast oceans that covered the earth. Nami stretched her hands in the air and looked over at the shelves upon shelves of books, navigation tools, and her own maps. So far, she had diligently found the time to draw maps of everywhere the crew had been, despite her crewmates' love of getting into trouble and being obnoxiously loud literally all the time. Luckily, Robin understood Nami's need for privacy and quiet so that she could concentrate on her maps, and Nami was thankful that Robin often stepped in to fill the mother position on the boat and calmed the boys down when things got out of hand. Luffy, Zoro, Usopp, Sanji, Chopper, Robin, Frankie, and Brook, all of them were really her nakama. Perhaps to other people that didn't mean as much as it did to her given her past. For the first 18 years of her life, she had no nakama. The only people who gave a rat's ass about her were her dead foster mother, Belmere, and her foster sister, Nijiko. She had swallowed her anger, hatred, and pride after Belmere's murder and joined the crew of the very pirate who killed her. Arlong. For 8 long years, Nami slowly but steadily stole the money she needed from other pirates to pay Arlong the 100 million berries to buy her village back. Not only until her last visit there did she realize that Nijiko wasn't the only one who knew, but Jen, the village leader, and the rest of the villagers knew as well. Then Luffy and the others had come to her rescue even when she had stolen the Going Merry, along with all the rest of their money, and abandoned them. A knock at the door snapped Nami back to reality, causing her to drop her pen on the desk. "Nami," it was Robin. "The door's open. Come on in," Nami called without getting up. "Nami," Robin said again after shutting the door behind her. Nami smiled when she heard the commotion outside caused by the male members of their crew. "Males come in." "Oh really?" Nami said. "First time in weeks?" Robin nodded. "One's for you." "Me?" The dark-haired beauty tossed an envelope over to the surprised redhead. Robin nodded. "From your village, I believe." Nami immediately opened the letter. Mail was a rarity, especially when out at sea. Only every few months would Nami receive a letter from her old village, but this time the letter was different. A small gasp escaped her lips as she quickly put a hand over her mouth. "Nami," Robin looked over from her side of the room, pausing as she placed the newspapers and other mail on her desk. "Is everything all right?" Nami's eyes were wide with shock and she was trembling, she couldn't respond. Robin swiftly walked over to Nami and took the letter from her hands. After quickly scanning it, she realized why the navigator was so shaken up. "Nijiko," she said softly. Nami's trembling turned into outright shaking as she nodded her head, still unable to speak. Robin had never met Nami's older foster sister, Nijiko, but Nami had told her all about her and the rest of her village. Nijiko was all the family Nami had left in this world, and according to the letter she had gone missing from the village. Since mail was hard to deliver across the oceans, the letter was about a month old. "Nami," Robin said and put a hand on her shoulder, attempting to comfort her. "This letter's a month old. Maybe they've found her by now." No response. Robin knew it was unlikely. The only reason that this letter was sent out to Nami in the first place was because Nijiko had already been missing for some time before it was even sent. The villagers wouldn't have wanted to worry Nami unless they were unable to find her for at least a good number of days. "Our Robin," a small, weak voice managed to sound from the trembling girl. "She's my only family. I have to go back." Robin looked down at her close friend. She knew that Nami would have to go back, no matter how much the rest of the crew would hate losing her. "Unless, we're going with you, Nami." "What?" Nami said in surprise and looked up at Robin. "No, we're so close to finding Shanks. The intel we have now won't be the same later, and if we all go back to the East Blue now, Luffy might never get this chance again." Robin smiled and knelt down so that she could look Nami in the eye. "It's okay. I'm sure Luffy wouldn't mind a detour. Besides," she lifted Nami's chin and wiped a tear away. "What kind of sister would I be to you if I wouldn't help you find your other sister?" Nami's tears streamed freely down her face now. "Robin," she cried and threw her arms around her. "Shush, it's okay. Nami." "Oi, Nami." Luffy practically bust down the door as he barreled into. Huge smile was on his face. "You gotta check this out, Usopp and I." He trailed off. "Nami?" he asked confusedly. Robin shot Luffy a disapproving look. "Read this," she said shortly and handed Luffy the letter. Luffy's wide, usually blank eyes filled with concern after a quick glance over the letter. "Nami." "I'm afraid we're going to have to make a detour," Robin stated simply. Luffy nodded in agreement. "No," Nami suddenly burst and stood up, shocking the other two in the room. "I mean, I'll just take one of the small boats and go on my own." "What? No way." Luffy said in his usual overdramatic way, waving his arms above his head. Nami. No, I don't want to run the 1000 Sunny off course now. We finally have the One Piece and we're so close to finding Shanks. If we go back to Kokoyashi now, then we may never have another chance like this again, she repeated. Robin stared at her bunkmate with her dark, saddened eyes. Her expression was hard to figure out as she crossed her arms. She then looked over at her captain, awaiting his response. As much as she wanted to help Nami, having the whole ship abandon their current mission wasn't exactly her decision to make. I'll be fine, Nami insisted to Luffy when neither Robin nor Luffy said a word. I'm a navigator. It's not like I'll get lost. And you guys'll have Robin and Frankie so you can keep going to find Shanks. Nami, Luffy interrupted. He was completely serious now, which was rare considering he was usually the most illogical, fun-loving, immature 24-year-old you'd ever meet. The two girls immediately gave their full attention to the newly crowned Pirate King. His serious expression turned into a smile. I want all of us to go back to Kokoyashi together. Nami opened her mouth to protest but was cut off by her captain. Shanks isn't dead and he's not going to be dead for a long time. Besides, it's our fate to see each other again, so I'm not too worried about it. Robin nodded her head in confirmation, a smile crossing her face, as I thought. Robin. Luffy, Nami said in a shaky voice, her eyes on the brink of tears again. Even though she and her crewmates had been together for a long time and they had all sacrificed so much for each other, more times than she could count, it always struck her when someone else did something nice for her when for so long in her life she had never had that kind of companionship. We're Nakama, aren't we? Luffy said now with a huge smile on his face. He put one arm around Nami's shoulders and the other around Robin's. We most certainly are, Robin nodded in agreement. Nami's smile finally broke through and she also nodded, unable to express her gratitude. All right, Luffy said, walking towards the door. Time to set a new course. Right, Nami said, regaining her control. I'll go tell the crew. Luffy flung open the door and started to sprint out the room but was held back by one of Robin's devil fruit arms. You don't even know where we are, let alone where we're going, Robin stated calmly. Nami laughed. That's right, she said and pinched her captain's rubbery face. I'll go out and tell the crew. Luffy pouted sullenly. Don't laugh at me because I can't navigate. That's why we have a navigator. Exactly, Nami said and reopened the door that had swung shut again. Let's set sail for Kokoyashi. Kokoyashi? Usopp asked in surprise after overhearing Nami's last statement. Nami nodded. Yeah, something came up and I have some business to take care of there. Business? What business? We're hot on the tail of Red Shanks. How can we go all the way back to East Blue now? Usopp asked naively. Nami smiled as she patted her long-nosed comrade on the head. Because it's my business, Usopp, she said cheekily. And since when did your business take precedence over anyone else's? Usopp said hot-headedly. Nami Swan's business always takes top priority, Sanji interrupted as he appeared from seemingly nowhere in between Usopp and Nami. Isn't that right, Nami Swan? That's right, Nami said. Thank you, Sanji-kun. That didn't answer my question, Usopp sulked to himself. Oi, Luffy, Frankie called from the deck below when the captain appeared out of the room. What's up, Frankie? Is what Nami's saying true? Are we abandoning our chase to go to the East Blue? Luffy's broad smile stretched from ear to ear as he nodded. That's right, he said. If one of us has business back home, then that means we all have business there. We're Nakama. Frankie smiled back. Of course, Captain. Zoro, who had been taking a nap on deck, lifted an eyelid and glanced over at his captain to show his support. Chopper and Brook, who had been on the top deck experimenting with different processes to give Brook more arms so that he could play the violin, guitar, and harmonica all at the same time, stopped what they were doing to see what was going on. East Blue? Chopper called down. Are we heading out of the Grand Line? Oh, the East Blue, Brook said dramatically. I've never been there before. What music I shall write to commemorate my visit there. That's right, Luffy said. Change our course. We're heading back to the East Blue. Aye aye. The crew shouted in unison, even Usopp. All right, Nami said. We're pretty far west, so we need to head south by southeast, 120 degrees. Aye. Chapter 2 The Gate, Back to normal seas soon. The Straw Hats were on their way back towards Loguetown, the only place where ships could enter and exit the Grand Line. It took them a lot less time to get out of the Grand Line than it had taken them to get so far into it, since the ocean itself seemed to want any ship that dared to sail in to get out as soon as possible. Within the week, the Thousand Sunny was out of the Grand Line and back into the normal oceans that they hadn't seen in so long. From Loguetown, it wouldn't be long before Nami's hometown island was in sight, but first they needed to restock up on supplies. Although they had spent years in the Grand Line and gotten to know the extraordinary climate changes, unpredictable currents, sea monsters, and not to mention other pirates and brave marines that had the strength to even enter the Grand Line, they were not unscathed as they made their exit. The stop at Loguetown was a necessity. Once they docked their ship, the crew split up to gather supplies that they felt were needed for their voyage to Koko. Yashi. Frankie of course stayed on the ship to fix up the damage received from their exploration of the Grand Line, and Brooke also had to stay on the ship because unfortunately for him, the people outside the Grand Line weren't as used to living skeletons as the people in the Grand Line. In fact, they weren't used to living skeletons whatsoever. Nami didn't want to go into town either, so that she could spend a little time thinking about what she could do about her missing sister once they got to Koko. Yashi. Even Robin couldn't convince her to go, even though she said that there was a huge sale going on in town. The navigator went into her and Robin's room once everyone else was gone and shut the door. Brooke was playing his violin and harmonica loudly as usual, giving Frankie some companionship as he fixed the ship. It wasn't that Brooke's music was annoying her, it was just that Nami wanted some time to think. But before she could settle herself down to do so, Luffy bust in the room as usual without knocking. "Luffy!" Nami screamed in surprise. "When will you learn to knock?" "Huh? Knock?" Luffy said in his ignorant innocence. "But Nami," he continued on a completely different train of thought, "you should come into town with me." "I already told you all that I wanted to stay here," Nami said with a huff. "Nope. You need to come into town with me," Luffy repeated. "Did you even hear what I said?" Nami said, now exasperated. Luffy smiled broadly and grabbed her hand. "All right. Let's go," he shouted and dragged her out of the room. "Luffy, I said I didn't want to go. It'll be awesome. We can go eat some meat, and then we could go see the market and eat more meat." Luffy, it was no use. Once Luffy made up his mind about something, it was nearly impossible to refuse him. Besides, she wasn't even sure he registered the reason why she would want to stay on the ship anyway. It was never really clear how much the rubber man could actually comprehend and how much went in one ear and out the other. The pair went downtown and cruised the different shops and restaurants. At first Nami didn't want to buy anything, but with Luffy's insistence and the great sales that were going on, plus the fact that in the Grand Line there wasn't nearly the selection that Loguetown had, she couldn't help herself. Luffy of course stuffed his face full of meats and other foods as they went their way. One thing he loved about big towns was the fact that the food wasn't cooped up in restaurants but out on the street with seemingly endless numbers of vendors selling all sorts of sweet and savory foods. No matter how many times Nami had eaten with her captain, it never ceased to amaze her how much food he could hold. At the end of the day, the crew all returned to the Thousand Sunny and prepared to set sail the next morning. Nami could finally sit down and think, since her skills wouldn't be needed until then. But when she put down all the stuff she had bought on her bed and actually did sit down to think, the only thing she could think about was how much fun she had had with Luffy that day. Then it hit her. Luffy didn't want to drag her into town just for the heck of it. He wanted to drag her into town so that she would stop worrying about something that she couldn't do anything about at the moment anyway. Everything he had done that day had been for her peace of mind, and she didn't even realize it until now. "Luffy," she whispered to herself. It was nearing midnight when the crew finally settled in their bunks and hammocks to sleep. Brooke, however, was always awake since he didn't really need to sleep, being a skeleton and all. He was up in his usual spot in the rafters, strumming on his guitar and quietly singing a song about his first venture outside the Grand Line as a member of the undead. Nami quietly slipped out of her room so as not to disturb Robin to get some fresh air. Being on the Thousand Sunny, with the soft music in the background, on a calm sea, overlooking the beautiful town of Loguetown without fearing that a storm could pop up any second that would end their existence, was soothing to her. She leaned over the side of the ship and looked at the thousands of lights that danced in the nighttime darkness of the town. She took a deep breath of fresh sea air in and then exhaled slowly. In one sense, This was paradise for her. This was what she had left her hometown for. Then something caught her eye that startled her. Up on the front of the ship sat Luffy looking out over the town as well. Nami hadn't seen him until then because he was sitting so still and silently. That was unusual for him. It was also unusual for him to be up at this hour. His love of sleep was second only to Zoro's. Nami quietly walked closer to the ship's front. "Hey, Luffy," she said softly so as not to surprise him. "Hi, Nami," Luffy said without turning around and without any hint of surprise in his voice. Of course he knew she was there. Nami laughed at herself for thinking that she could sneak up on him in the first place. Although he didn't look it, and most of the time he didn't act like it, he was probably the most perceptive one of them all. "What are you doing up so late?" she asked casually. "Looking," Luffy said simply. Nami rolled her eyes. He always said such obvious, blunt statements that never really answered the question. "Oh, well," she paused to find the right words to say. "I just wanted to say thank you for taking me into town today." "Yeah, no problem," Nami smiled. "I didn't realize at first why you wanted me to go so badly, but now I know that you just didn't want me to worry about Nezuko." That made Luffy turn to face her, a huge smile on his face. "Nah, I just wanted to spend some time with my nakama," he smirked. "Huh?" Nami raised an eyebrow. That was an unexpected answer, even coming from him. "Don't get me wrong. I love our crew now, with Robin, Chopper, Sanji, Usopp, Frankie, and Brook. But I was just thinking back to the time when it was just the three of us." Three of us meaning Luffy, Zoro, and herself. "Oh," was all she could say. "We were just starting out on our adventure," Luffy said as he leaned back against the railing. "Yeah, we were. Even with just the three of us, we still made an awesome crew, huh?" Nami laughed. "Well, remember I wasn't really part of the crew then." "That's what you think," Luffy said and stuck a tongue out at her. Nami reciprocated the gesture and laughed. "All right. You got me. We did make a pretty good crew." "Yeah," Luffy said looking up at the sky. "You guys were always so serious, you know?" "What? Is that a bad thing?" "Not at all. I liked making you guys laugh. Now we have a whole bunch of us that can laugh together, but I liked being the one to make you laugh." Nami raised an eyebrow again, slightly confused at his statement. "Oh, I get it," she said with a smug look on her face. "You liked being the annoying one, huh? Well, don't worry. Out of everyone on this ship, you're still the one that gets on M. Good," Luffy said with a laugh. "That'll always be my job." Nami pretended to sigh and rubbed her temples like she had a headache. "Wow, thanks a lot, Luffy." "No problem." The two fell silent as they watched the stars, both the real ones in the sky and lookalikes on land. "Nami," Luffy said breaking the silence, "don't ever think of leaving me again." Luffy seemed to be full of confusing statements that night. She knew he was usually blunt and everything, but he wasn't usually this serious so suddenly. And what exactly did he mean by "don't ever leave me"? Didn't he want everyone to stay together? Luffy, she looked up at him. He had his hands behind his head and was still looking up at the night sky. She sighed and looked back down at the water. "You know that I wouldn't leave because I wanted to. It's just Nezuko." Luffy heard the faint sound of a covered-up sniffle. He swung his legs over the railing and jumped back down on the deck next to his navigator. "Don't cry, Nami," he said as he put a hand on her shoulder. "We'll find Nezuko no matter what." Nami managed a smile and nodded. She had learned to trust him. Trust Luffy. He'd never broken a promise to anyone as far as she knew, and he had made a lot of promises throughout their adventure. Everyone's sad story seemed to affect him to the point that he would take them personally. But that was Luffy. He cared about everyone and everything, even someone like her who had tricked, backstabbed, and abandoned him and the rest of the crew on multiple occasions. "Thanks, Luffy." The welcome back party. A few days later, the Thousand Sunny finally docked at the familiar shore off Kokoyashi village. Chopper, Robin, Frankie, and Brook had never been there before, but the others smiled in remembrance of when they defeated the Arlong pirates, freed the island folk, and saved their precious navigator. "Yo ho 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 ho," Brook exclaimed as he leaned out over the railing to get a closer look at the town. "So this is where Nami grew up?" Nami nodded. "Yup. It sure is. It's so quaint, so peaceful. Why, I think I'm feeling the beginnings of a song. The place from whence my true love came." He whipped out his guitar as he began to break out into song. True love, Sanji yelled at the skeleton. Nami Swan is not your true love, she's my true love. Yo ho ho, Brook laughed in Sanji's face. Someone like you could never understand what it means to have a true love. What did you say, you empty-headed sack of bones? Hey, you two. Stop making such a fuss, Robin said calmly but with authority. Oh, but I didn't mean that Nami-san was my only true love, Robin Schwan, Sanji said quickly, afraid that he had left Robin out. You are, of course, my true love. See? That's exactly what I mean, Brook said. Sanji shot Brook a death glare which would have done nothing anyway since he was already dead. All right, Luffy said. Let's get going. I'm sure General will be happy to see us again. Am I allowed to go with you? Brook asked tentatively. No, Sanji yelled. Sure, Luffy said at the same time. This village has seen Grand Line people a lot. They won't be scared of anything. Yahoo! Brook yelled as he ran off to get his things. Oi, Luffy, Zoro said. Are you sure letting a walking, talking skeleton into the village is a smart idea? Of course, Luffy said. Brook isn't scary at all. Maybe not to you, Usopp said. Anyway, we should get going. Robin interrupted, motioning over to Nami, who was staring out into the town with a half-scared, half-excited look on her face, completely oblivious to what her crewmates had been discussing. Right, Usopp said. I'd like to visit all of my adoring fans from back when I, Captain Usopp, defeated the Arlong pirates. Frankie said. I'm sure that's exactly what happened. It sure is. Ahahaha. Usopp said, completely missing the sarcasm in the shipwright's voice. What are we waiting for then? Luffy yelled. Let's go. The crew unloaded themselves onto the dock and began their walk into town. Since the Going Merry had been demolished and the Straw Hats had a new ship, the townspeople didn't seem to recognize them until. It's Na-chan. Nami-chan. The whole village seemed to drop what they were doing and rushed over to greet the young redhead. Hello, everyone, Nami greeted enthusiastically. It's been a while. It has indeed, a strong deep voice said from within the crowd. Jen-san, Nami cried and ran over to hug her old friend. Nami, Jen replied, giving her a squeeze. It's been years. She nodded. How's everyone been? Well, Jen trailed. We've all been fine. Great, actually, since Luffy and the others drove off Arlong and his crew. Business has been booming and our town has grown a little since you left, but. Nijiko. Jen nodded. Maybe we should talk about that later. But first you must introduce us to your friends. Oh, right, Nami said. You all remember Luffy, Zoro, Usopp, and Sanji, right? How could we forget our heroes? One of the villagers said with a laugh. Yeah, they've all turned into legends around these parts. Of course, Nami said, joining in the laughter. Well, this here is Chopper, Nami said, pointing to a shivering ball of fur attempting to hide behind Robin's leg. He's our doctor. Ah, he's so cute, one of the children cried. Yeah. The children began crowding around Chopper, trying to pet him. Chopper, overwhelmed with all the compliments and attention, did his usual routine of laughing nervously and blushing, saying that he wasn't that cute or that amazing for being able to talk, but of course he was loving every minute of it. Chopper's hiding behind Robin, our historian and archaeologist, Nami continued. Hello, Robin said with a smile. There's Frankie, our shipwright. Yo. And Brook, our musician. And how do you all do this fine afternoon? Brook said overdramatically as he took off his hat and bowed low to the ground. The crowd of villagers turned silent, including the children, as they all took in the walking, talking skeleton in front of them. Ah! Some of the women screamed as they ran for their lives back into their houses. The men didn't scream but did take several steps back, all shaking with fear. It's a walking, talking skeleton, Mom, one of the village boys said fearlessly and began to poke at Brook's bony leg. Excuse me, son, Brook said with a frown. That's musician to you. I told you, Luffy, Sanji said as he lit a cigarette. Jen immediately burst out laughing. Ha ha ha. I would expect nothing less from the Straw Hat Pirates, he roared. The other men began joining in the laughter as the women re-emerged from their dwellings. Told you, Sanji, Luffy said with glee. Brook's not scary at all. Well, he is a little frightening at first, Robin mused as she crossed her arms. I cannot help the wretched state I am in, Brook cried and operatically put the back of his hand up to his forehead. All right, let's get you guys inside, General said, patting Luffy on the back. Hungry? Yes, Luffy, Usopp, Zoro, Chopper, and Frankie all shouted together. Great, because we're going to have a feast in your honor. Yahoo! Luffy shouted and punched the air. Will there be meat? Of course, you dummy, Nami said, rolling her eyes. Yahoo! Luffy shouted again. And a whole lot of booze, Jen added, which made Zoro nod in approval. And it was a feast as General said it would be. The whole village came out bringing dish upon dish of delicious foods. Sanji was glad to be able to be fed without having to make it himself, giving him more time to get acquainted with the ladies of the town. Zoro, Frankie, Usopp, and Chopper were all enjoying themselves with kegs of beer and lots of food. Luffy was of course running around the feast eating anything and everything he laid eyes on. When people began to settle in their places to eat after all coming to greet Nami and the heroes, she, Robin and Jen sat down at a table. Jen-san, Nami said in a serious tone, about Nezuko. Jen nodded. Yes, so you finally received my letter. What happened to her, Jen-san? He sighed a long sigh and took a drink of his beer. It all happened so suddenly. The two girls prepared themselves for an emotional story. It was a little more than 2 months ago, Jen began. It was like any other day in our quiet village. Business was going on as usual and Nezuko had come into town to sell some of Belmere-san's tangerines. I even had lunch with her that day when she took a break from selling. She told me that she had had an exceptionally good year for growing and that Belmere-san would be proud. It was in the late afternoon when Nezuko decided to go back home. I saw her head up the road towards your house and then headed to my own. It had become so peaceful here. I had no need to worry about Nezuko's safety on her way back to your house. The next morning, when the mail came, I received a knock on my door, and the postman told me that he had stopped by Nezuko's house, but she wasn't there, so he had to deliver this package to me. I thought it a little strange since usually packages were left outside if someone wasn't home, but I took it anyway. I put it aside thinking that Nezuko was probably expecting it and she would come down later that day to pick it up, but she didn't come. I decided the next day to bring the package to her. I ended up only having time to go to your house the next evening, though, and when I arrived at your house, she wasn't home. Of course the door was unlocked as it usually is, so I let myself in. What I saw shock inside of your house was destroyed. Everything was either scorched or a pile of ashes. I couldn't believe it when I saw it, so I ran around the house and the Tangerine Grove shouting Nezuko's name. There was no reply. I finally returned to the house and decided to open the package as it was suspicious anyway since it was delivered to me upon Nezuko's absence. Inside were only this necklace and a note. Jen paused his storytelling to hand Nami the necklace and the note. Nami shakily opened the note and read, Izanami, please do not take offense at my taking your sister, Nezuko, on account of your absence. She is safe and unharmed. If you wish to see her, follow the pendant. I will be waiting for you. Truly yours, Izanagi. Nami asked, looking up at General. I wasn't sure what it meant either, General said, shaking his head. Izanami and Izanagi were the goddess and god that supposedly created all living beings on Earth, Robin said, crossing her arms. They were part of an ancient culture's legends. Most of the stories from that era have been lost, so I'm not surprised that you don't know about it. Robin, Nami said. So what happens in this legend of Izanami and Izanagi? Jen asked. Robin shook her head. Besides what I just told you, I can't say for sure. The only other thing is that they were separated for some reason even though they were in love. In love? Nami asked. That doesn't give us much to go on, General said, rubbing his chin. Unfortunately not, Robin said. But on the issue of Nezuko's kidnapping, we should look more closely at the necklace. Right, Nami said. She gave the necklace over to the dark-haired woman. Robin held it up to the light and examined it closely. This pendant is very old, she finally said after a few minutes. From what I can tell, it was made around the same time that the legend of Izanami and Izanagi was from. What does that symbol on it mean? Jen asked Robin. She leaned in for a closer look and furrowed her eyebrows in deep thought. Finally she let out a sigh and lowered the pendant. I'll have to do more research on this as I'm not exactly the expert on this era. All I can tell is that there are what looks like the sun and the sea. The sun and the sea, Nami repeated. What does that have to do with Izanami and Izanagi? Robin shrugged her shoulders. Like I said, I'm going to have to do more research on this. Oh, Robin, don't worry too much about it, Nami said with a fake lighthearted laugh. I can do the research. You should relax and… Don't be ridiculous, Nami, Robin interrupted. Researching is what I do best, and besides, the ends of Robin's lips curled up in a small smile and the hint of a twinkle could be seen in her dark eyes. All of this has gotten me very interested. Nami couldn't help but smile back at her friend. Robin was usually very subtle with her emotions. Some would even say she was cold, but Nami knew that when she got that look in her eye, Robin was feeling an intense excitement. Almost like when Luffy, Zoro, or Sanji was ready to kick someone's ass. Robin, what's this thingy? Robin's twinkle disappeared as she crossed her arms. A pendant, she replied to her rubber captain who had somehow managed to sneak up on them and grab the pendant out of Robin's hands. Whoa, it's so cool, Luffy exclaimed, his eyes bugging out. Luffy, give that back, Nami ordered as she stood up to grab it from him. No, I want to see it, Luffy whined and stretched his arm up higher than Nami could reach. Luffy, Nami, both of you cut it out, Robin said in her quiet but firm way. The two younger ones looked at Robin and immediately stopped bickering. Luffy begrudgingly handed the pendant back to Robin. I'm going back to the ship and I'll be doing some research, so don't disturb me, she announced, emphasizing the last 3 words directed solely at Luffy. She got up and without another word was lost in the crowd of partying people. Ooh, she's scary, Luffy trembled as he rubbed his arms. You know she doesn't like to be bothered when she's doing research, Nami said with a sigh. And you, Luffy, are the king of bothering people. Luffy snapped back to his old playful self. Well, you got me there, ahahaha. Nami rolled her eyes but couldn't help but laugh along with her captain. Hey, I just ate this melon that I couldn't eat last time we were here, Luffy said, completely changing the subject. Melon? Nami asked. Yeah, the Namuhama melon. Nami raked her brain to remember what the hell Luffy was talking about. Oh, she finally said. I can't believe you remember something like that from so long ago. If it's food, I can remember anything, Luffy said proudly. Jen started laughing. You got that right, he said. You nearly cleaned us out last time you were here. You have to try some, Nami, it's delicious. Luffy grabbed her wrist before she could object and dragged her off into the crowd. Jen smiled after the two young ones. I guess he did keep his promise to me, he said to himself. She never lost her smile. Home. After the party ended, it was already 4 in the morning and only a few hours before sunrise. Luffy had dragged Nami all over town, making her eat all sorts of foods that she had eaten when she was younger. It brought back a lot of memories. For some reason, he didn't seem to want to let her out of his sight the whole rest of the evening, but she was fine with that. She had known Luffy for almost 7 years now, and she was by far the one who could best deal with and counter Luffy's over-the-top personality and immaturity. Even though she'd never say it out loud, the two of them made a great team. He provided the power, determination, and loyalty, while she provided the brains, logic, and improvisation needed to be a great pirate. Now that everyone else had gone to sleep, Nami and Luffy sat on the cliff in front of Belmir's grave. Luffy was already asleep and had fallen back in the grass snoring peacefully. Nami, however, was wide awake as she looked at her foster mother's grave. Belmir-san, she whispered. Jen had suggested that she didn't go to her home as it was still in shambles. The villagers had helped to clean it out, but there was no furniture, not even a sink or toilet, that was usable. Besides, the sight of her home destroyed was probably going to make her cry. Nijiko's gone missing, Nami continued to whisper to Belmir. I've been away for so long without visiting. If I were here, this wouldn't have happened to her. A tear slid down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. I don't know what's going on with this whole Izanagi thing, but if the person who took Nijiko wanted me, it's my responsibility to bring her back. Then we can be a family again. A gust of wind blew across the cliff, causing the pinwheel at the base of Belmir's grave to turn. Nami smiled. It was like Belmir was responding to her. She looked out over the ocean and saw the first rays of sun begin to appear over the horizon. Oi, Nami, Luffy mumbled. Nami said in surprise. She had thought he was completely asleep. Luffy then said something completely incoherent and then turned towards her. Nami laughed to herself and looked back out at the sunrise. Suddenly she felt Luffy's arms surround her waist, and his head somehow made it into her lap, which made her look back down at him. She raised an eyebrow. "Luffy," she said in a warning tone, thinking that he was awake, and if he was then she'd have a bonk on the head ready for him, but he was in fact still asleep. Was he dreaming or something? He did say her name. Was he dreaming about her? The thought made her blush. No way. She and Luffy were friends, crewmates, partners even. Nothing more than that. But still. Luffy was completely asleep but yet said her name and was now using her as a human pillow. "Luffy," Nami said again, but this time with a hint of tenderness. She put a hand on his head. They'd been through a lot together. The whole crew had. She was thankful for having them as friends and honored to call them her nakama. After a while of silence, Luffy's eyes suddenly shot open and he sat up in a flash. Ah! He yawned and stretched his arms way up in the air. That was a good nap. Nami nearly fell backwards. "Luffy," she yelped in surprise. "You scared the crap out of me." "Huh? Oh, sorry, Nami," he said with a cheeky grin. Nami looked at him in disbelief and shook her head. Then she went back to watching the sun rise. "Did you get any sleep?" Luffy asked. "Nope," she said lightly, "I wasn't tired." Luffy frowned knowing that she was lying. Does it have something to do with that pendant? Nami raised an eyebrow at him. For being the most illogical, spacey person on the ship, he was definitely perceptive, sometimes. "Yeah," she said. No use lying to him. "What were you guys talking about last night?" Luffy asked innocently, hugging his knees. Nami shrugged. "Just what happened to Nezuko." What happened? Normally she wouldn't have wanted to talk about it, but it was Luffy, and regardless if he understood or not, she always liked talking to him. Nezuko was kidnapped by someone calling himself Izanagi. He left a note in that pendant and said he was waiting for someone called Izanami, and, if I wanted to see Nezuko again, I would follow the pendant. "Follow the pendant?" Luffy repeated. That doesn't make sense. The sun and sea are carved on the pendant. Robin's doing some research to figure out what it means. Who's this Izanagi guy anyway? Beats me. Well, if he wants to mess with your family, I won't let him escape, Luffy said, making a fist. He had that excited look on his face anytime he was eager to kick some ass. "We have to find him first," Nami stated matter-of-factly. "If he wanted to see you so badly, then why did he make himself so difficult to find?" Nami thought about it. "That's a good question," she finally said. "I have no idea. Anyway, we should start looking for Nezuko once we find the rest of our crew," Luffy said and stood up. "Luffy, wait," Nami said. She looked down, unable to meet her captain's eye. "I don't know how long this is going to take, and I don't want you and the rest of the crew to lose your own dreams on account of me." A look of seriousness flitted across Luffy's face, but only for a second. It was soon replaced with a huge smile. He put a hand on Nami's head and tousled her hair. "Don't be an idiot," was all he said, and then left. "What? I'm not being an idiot, idiot," she yelled after him. Luffy raised a hand to wave at her but didn't turn around. Nami sighed and got up. Even though they bickered a lot, it was actually one of the things that helped calm her down when she was worried about other, more important things. She looked over towards her house and Belmir's treasured tangerine grove. It was now or never. She didn't really want to let the rest of the crew see her reaction when she saw her house. Now was the perfect time. She was strong, she could do this. The orchard and the outside of the house looked completely normal. "That's strange," Nami said out loud to herself. "Didn't Gen-san say that everything was burned? If there was a fire inside, then the outside should have some burn marks or something." As she stood in front of the door, her hand stopped short of pushing it open. Nami swallowed a lump that had formed in her throat. She clenched her fist to keep it from shaking. "Don't be a coward," she scowled at herself. With a deep breath, she swung the door completely open. The windows were drawn shut, so it was too dark to see everything at first, but as her eyes adjusted, she began to make out what used to be furniture. The villagers had swept out most of the ash, but the burn marks on the walls, floor, and ceiling were evidence enough that what Jen had said was true. What remained was the scorched countertop and a table that looked like it was about to crumble any minute. "Nezuko, Nami." It was General Gen-san. Nami turned around in surprise. I'm sorry you had to see this, General said. Nami shook her head. I had to, she replied. But, Gen-san, inside is completely scorched and burned, but the outside doesn't have a scratch on it. How is that possible? Gen's brows furrowed in thought. I noticed that myself, he said. I don't know how that would be possible. No one noticed any smoke coming from this direction around the time of Nijiko's disappearance either. It's very strange. Yes, Nami agreed. She shut the door. I've seen enough. Gen nodded. I know that you and your friends are going to try and find her. If there's anything I can do, please let me know. You've done more than enough, Gen-san, Nami said with a strong smile. If anyone can find Nijiko, it'll be Luffy and the others. We've been through a lot together and I trust them. Gen's expression lightened up at the word trust. He was so happy that Nami had finally found friends, true friends, who were strong, dependable, and most of all, gained her trust. She had grown into such a strong and happy woman. Much different from the young rascal to put a hand on her head. I'm glad, he said and tousled her hair. Nami smiled confidently. All right, she said. Luffy went off to find the others, so I'm going to head back to the ship. Please leave this to us, Gen-san. As much as he wanted to drop everything and help Nami find her sister, he did have an entire town to run, and so he nodded in agreement, shedding light. Okay. Luffy yelled at the crew minus Nami. We'll find Nijiko no matter what, right guys? Aye, Usopp said with a salute. Chopper nodded and followed suit. Of course, Sanji said. I would never abandon Nami-san in her time of need. Speaking of Nami, Frankie said. Where is she? Oh, she was up at her house, but she'll be here any minute now, Luffy said. In the meantime, maybe you should fill us in on what exactly is going on here, Zoro said. I can do that, Robin said before Luffy could speak. We all know that Nijiko, Nami's older sister, is missing. Apparently someone kidnapped her, ransacked the house, and left a note in this pendant with General. She held up the pendant for everyone to see. Strange, Sanji said, leaning in to inspect it more closely. Hey, Robin, Chopper said, also looking more closely at the pendant. Isn't that a picture of the sun and the ocean? Robin nodded. After doing some reading last night, I found that the carvings on the pendant are indeed the sun and the sea. The note that was left with the pendant addressed Nami as Izanami, and it was signed Izanagi. Izanami and Izanagi were characters in a legend from an ancient civilization called Japan. Although this country is now gone, some of its culture still lingers in society today. Sanji's name, for instance, is from the language that was spoken back then. Oi, Sanji, did you know that? Usopp asked. The cook shrugged. Nope. Huh. Robin knows more about you than you do, Frankie said with a laugh and smacked Sanji's shoulder. Also, Nami's name comes from that same civilization, Robin continued. Sanji perked up at this. Nami Swan. He swooned. Our destinies had always been decided since ancient times. Our past is interconnected, and so therefore is our future together. Zoro bonked Sanji's head with the butt of one of his swords. Shut up. Oh, you want to fight, Zoro? Sanji said angrily. If you don't be quiet I will. Why you? Robin used her devil fruit hands to separate the two. As I was saying, she said calmly, continuing as if nothing had happened. Izanagi and Izanami were brother and sister gods that were charged with the creation of the world. Izanagi was god of the sun and Izanami was the goddess of the sea. Although they were siblings, they had fallen in love with each other and were determined to have a family. Brother and sister? Usopp, Luffy, and Chopper all said simultaneously, ew. Ignoring her crewmates again, Robin continued. The two abandoned their duties and tried to have a child. But when it was born, it had no bones, a leech child. They abandoned the child and he became the ruler of the underworld. All demons are said to have originated from him. Ashamed of the curse that they had brought upon the deities, they had no choice but to return to the heavens and apologize. As punishment, the other gods decided that they were to fulfill their duties and then be separated forever. So Izanagi, the sun god, was imprisoned in the sky while Izanami was imprisoned on the earth. Life began as a result, as we need both the sun in the sky and water on the earth to have life. Robin put the pendant back in her pocket. Yo-ho-ho. Interesting, Brook mused as he rubbed his bony chin with his bony fingers. I believe I once heard a song about that tale. Is that so? Robin asked. Of all the legends and stories from ancient times, this one is the most famous, but it is still quite obscure. So, this guy who calls himself Izanagi is probably some delusional psycho that thinks that that legend is true, Usopp said. Robin nodded. That would be the most logical thing. The only other option is that the legend is in fact true somehow. Like that could possibly be true, Zoro said with a yawn. They're called legends for a reason. It better not be true, Sanji said with a growl. Who does this Izanagi think he is anyway? Hey, guys. Nami greeted as she boarded the Thousand Sunny. Sorry to keep you waiting. Nami Swan, Nami, Robin said. I was just telling the others about what I had learned from my research last night. Really? Nami said, her face lighting up. But first, did you find anything at your house? Nami nodded. Maybe. Jen-san said that all the furniture inside the house was destroyed, burned up into ashes or scorched beyond repair, and that was all true, but the outside of the house didn't have any burn or smoke marks anywhere. Jen-san also said that none of the villagers noticed smoke coming from my house around the time Nijiko was taken. Robin said. Very interesting. Huh? Luffy asked. You know something, Robin? Perhaps. The interesting burn patterns might have something to do with fact that Izanagi is the god of the sun, Robin said. Hey, Robin, Chopper said, tapping her on the leg. Yes, Chopper? Can I see that necklace again? Of course. She took it out of her pocket and handed it to the pint-sized reindeer. Chopper held it extremely closely to his face, narrowing his eyes. Oi, Chopper. Do you see something? Luffy asked, squatting down beside him and consequently also shoving his face close to the pendant. Startled by the close proximity, Chopper jumped back and nearly dropped the pendant. Luffy, give him some space, Nami said, pinching his cheek and pulling him back up to a standing position. I think I can see something in the sea, Chopper said, pointing to the pendant. What is it? Brook asked. It looks like a map of an island. What? Let me see that, Nami said and grabbed it from Chopper. She squinted her eyes to the point where they were almost shut. I don't see anything. Hey, let me see, Luffy said and shoved his face next to Nami's so that he could get a good look. Oi, Chopper, are you sure? I don't see anything either. Hold on a moment, Robin said as she pulled out a magnifying glass. She calmly took the pendant back and looked through the glass. After a moment of silence she gasped. Oh, I see it, Chopper. Really? Nami and Luffy said together. Robin nodded. I can't believe the detail, it's so tiny. Luffy stretched his neck out so that he could look through the magnifying glass as well. Oh, I see it too, Chopper. You could see that without the magnifying glass? Chopper nodded. Maybe being small lets me notice small things better. Amazing. Luffy shouted. If it's a map, then that's where we have to go, right, Robin? Nami said. That's logical, she replied. I guess that's what the note meant by follow the pendant. But seriously, if he wanted Nami to follow that map on the pendant to get to him, then why did he make it so damn small? Zoro asked. Yeah, if Chopper weren't here, then we might have never seen it at all, Frankie said. This all seems fishy to me, Usopp added, scrunching up his long nose. It is strange, Nami said. Luffy asked earlier that if this Izanagi wanted to see me so badly, why is he making it so difficult for us to find him? I said that? Luffy asked in surprise. You don't remember anything, do you? Nami sighed in exasperation. So how do we get to this mysterious island? Brook practically sang. Well, first things first, Nami said. I'm going to have to draw a bigger version of the map. Then we'll all have to look through our maps in the library and see if we can find it. What? Study? Zoro asked. Yes, Zoro, Nami said with a smirk. For once in your life you'll have to open a book and read. Zoro shot Nami a scowl. We'll all help you, Nami Swan, even this lunkhead swordsman. Or else, he said, giving Zoro the evil eye. And you're going to make me? I will if I need to. Is that a challenge? And what if it is? Nami bonked both men on the head with her fists. Quit arguing and start looking, she shouted. Yo ho ho, she's scary, Brook said. Yeah, we should probably start looking, Usopp agreed. A few minutes later, Nami came out of her room with a larger version of the map that was carved on the pendant. Here's what we're looking for. Since log poses don't work out here, where is the old-fashioned way? Right. Chopper said with a nod. I'll find that island in no time, Nami-san, Sanji said with serious determination. Soon the Straw Hat Pirates were sprawled out across the deck with piles of books and maps surrounding each of them. The sight of all her crewmates studying up made Nami laugh to herself. She'd never thought she'd see the day. The only ones who liked books and reading were herself, Robin, and Chopper. She didn't even know if Luffy knew how to read until now. Luckily he did. Oi, Nami, Luffy said for what seemed like the millionth time since they started the search. What, Luffy? Nami said, obviously annoyed. Luffy either didn't notice the tone or ignored it as he scooted up to her with a book in his hand. Is it this island? He asked, pointing to a picture of a map. Luffy, I gave you a copy of the map, Nami said, shutting a book with frustration. Can't you just look for yourself? They all look the same to me, Luffy shrugged. Me too, Zoro said, closing another book. Even if I did see it, I probably wouldn't notice that it was the right island. Nami frowned. The two of them were hopeless when it had to do with anything related to maps or directions. Nami, Usopp said. What? Hey, calm down, I'm not like them, Usopp retorted. I think I might have found it. Really? Nami immediately jumped up and rushed over to her long-nosed crewmate, knocking Luffy over in the process. Oi, Nami, he complained, but she ignored him. Usopp, you're a genius. That's it, Nami said, glowing. Haha, Usopp said with a cheeky smile. The great Usopp will never fail once a task is given to him. Ahahaha. Well, I guess I just wasted all that time for nothing, Zoro said. It wasn't a waste, Zoro, with all of his looking, it didn't take that long, Chopper said happily. If it had just been one person we definitely wouldn't have found it so quickly. That's right, Chopper, Nami said, smiling down at the cute little reindeer. Ah, good. Luffy exclaimed as he jumped up. That means we can set sail again. Aye. Everyone shouted in response. Wait, I'm just going to tell Gen-san that we're leaving, Nami said as she ran off the ship. I'll be back in a minute. Let's make preparations while she's gone, Robin said. Okay. The Straw Hat Pirates were eager to get back to what they did best, which was definitely not reading books and studying. Once Nami was back, the crew set sail toward the mysterious unknown island. The long and frustrating voyage north. Unfortunately for the Straw Hat Pirates, the little unknown island was all the way in the North Blue. In fact, it was at the most northern tip of the North Blue, making the voyage rather long. Much longer than what Nami was hoping for. Even with her incredible navigation skills and Frankie's powered-up additions to the ship, it was still taking a while. It had been more than a week since they had left the coast of Kokoyashi, and according to the map, the island was still a ways away from their current position. Not only that, they also had multiple run-ins with the Marines and bounty hunters that wanted their heads for the combined bounty of almost 1 billion berries. It seemed that even if Luffy was the king of the pirates, the lure of that amount of money was enough reason for quite a few idiots to attack them. Needless to say, the reoccurring confrontations made progress even slower than usual. Geez, will these people ever learn? Sanji said as he smoked his cigarette. They had just gotten away from band of bounty hunters and were headed slightly off course to seek shelter. Probably not, Frankie replied matter-of-factly. With all the attention we've been getting thanks to our captain, anyone would be able to recognize us from miles away. It's like we have a big target on our sail, Usopp said. At least it's not like the Grand Line, Robin said, turning a page in her book that she was reading. Most of these people are weak. Very true, Robin-chan, Sanji said, but it's pretty annoying. I'll say, Brook said. I've not had a moment's peace since we've set sail from the quaint village of Kokoyashi, and I've had so many songs that have slipped my mind because I haven't had the chance to write them down. Oh, woe is me. Hey, has anyone seen Nami? Chopper asked, walking down the stairs to the main deck. Nope, Frankie replied. Come to think of it, I haven't seen her all day, Sanji said. Nami Swan? Where are you? Maybe she wanted some time alone, Usopp said. I mean, she's probably more frustrated than anyone else with our slow progress. That's true, Brook said. Her poor sister is awaiting her rescue, and here we are still floundering about in the sea. Oh, the humanity. And where's Luffy? It's not like him to disappear for this long, Chopper said. He's probably eating or napping somewhere, Frankie said with a yawn. With all these delays, I can't say I blame him. What do you mean? How could anyone sleep with all this going on? Chopper asked. We just escaped a bunch of pyromaniacs, there were explosions everywhere. Well, this lazy-ass swordsman can, Sanji said with a frown. Sleeping like that while Nami Swan and Robin Schwan are in danger. Sure enough, Zoro was snoring away at his usual spot on the grassy deck. It didn't matter that they were being chased. Once Zoro heard it was just a group of bounty hunters, he immediately went back to his nap saying that they didn't need him to get rid of them, which was true. Meanwhile, Nami had been in her and Robin's room poring over the maps again and again to make absolute sure that they were sailing in the quickest route possible to the island. All the setbacks were getting on her nerves, and she was growing impatient. Not only were the attacks on the ship time-consuming, she also had to recalculate everything after each time they got off course. She slammed her hands on the table in frustration. This is taking too long, she said out loud. Nejiko might be dead by now, and we're just wallowing around in this stupid excuse for a sea. She began pacing the room. If we have no more attacks then we should be there by tomorrow, but at this rate, we can probably expect 3 or more attacks making our progress slower so we'd be there by the end of the week. But, she grabbed her hair. I don't have time for this. Nami? Luffy's voice suddenly appeared out of nowhere. For a second, Nami stared blankly at her captain with bunches of her hair still in her hands, but only for a second. Ah! She screamed in surprise. She then walked over to him and bonked him on the head. Don't scare me like that. Ow, 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 Nami, that hurt, Luffy said rubbing his head. Good. Nami shouted and turned back to the map table in a huff. Why are you so upset? Luffy asked innocently. Why do you think? Nami scowled much like Zoro did when he was pissed. Maybe she was spending a little too much time around the swordsman. Are you hungry? Luffy suggested, completely missing the point. No, Nami screamed. Oh, do you need to take a nap? No, Luffy. Nami rubbed her temples and tried to calm herself down. It's nothing, she finally said. She didn't want to tell her captain why she was really frustrated. The fact that she was sailing around with the king of the pirates would of course slow down any progress they were making. She knew that from the beginning, but she didn't know it would be this bad. And it wasn't Luffy's fault either, so she couldn't be mad at him. Nothing? Luffy asked, completely oblivious. Yeah, Nami said and started aimlessly poking around her maps so as not to look Luffy in the eye. A moment of silence was shared between them, with Nami poking her maps and Luffy staring somewhat blankly at his navigator. Finally, after an awkward minute or so, Nami pretended like she heard something. Oh, you hear that? I should go see if we've escaped those stupid bounty hunters? Ahahaha, she said nervously. Luffy looked questioningly at her. Nami opened the door. You coming or what? Sure. The two came out on deck. Oh, there you guys are, Chopper said with a laugh. We've outrun those damn idiot bounty hunters, Frankie said. Good, Nami said with a nod. As frustrated as she was, she couldn't let her crewmates know. They were all doing this for her and she was grateful to them. We're going to set a new course, she announced. She began barking orders to the crew, including Luffy, sounding very much like the captain. Even though Luffy was the real captain, everyone listened more to Nami when it came to sailing. Plus, Luffy didn't mind being bossed around by Nami anyway. 3 days later, after a few more run-ins with the Marines and bounty hunters, the Straw Hats were nearing the island. Since they were so far north, they had already begun to run into ice, which was slowing their progress at first, but Frankie and Usopp whipped up a cutting and melting ice add-on to the ship, making the rest of their journey a bit less frustrating. Soon the Thousand Sunny was anchored at a small island that looked more like a humongous iceberg than an island. Oi, Nami, are you sure this is the right TT island? Usopp asked through chattering teeth. Even though he was wrapped up in layers upon layers of clothing, the bitter cold still cut through him like a knife. Nami said, nodding her head. It has to be. I've never navigated us to the wrong island before. This is the right one, Robin said. According to the map, this island is the closest one to the North Pole. North Pole? Frankie said. Well, that explains why it's so damn cold. If it's so damn cold, then why are you still only in that disgusting Speedo? Usopp yelled. Hey, I like my outfit, Frankie said with a prideful sniff. And I'm not a weakling like you. I'm not weak. It's just so CC cold. Usopp frowned as he grabbed another blanket to wrap around himself. Quit being a baby, Zoro said, crossing his arms. He was wearing only a jacket over his normal clothes but seemed to be fine. Usopp stared incredulously at the cyborg and the legendary swordsman, who were both dressed so terribly inappropriately for the weather they were experiencing. All right, Luffy said, punching the air. Let's go find this Izanagi bastard and get Nezuko back. Yes, Nami agreed. We have to hurry or, wait a minute, Chopper interrupted. We can't just go exploring out there unprepared. Chopper's right, Robin said. It doesn't look like there are any inhabitants, and we don't know if TD life. If we're not careful, we could freeze to death, Chopper added. If it's this cold during the day, there's no way we can survive the night out there. Then what can we do? Sanji asked. It seems like we can only explore a very limited area. We'd have to be able to make it back to the ship before sundown. With this weather condition, I would say that it would probably take more than a half-day's walk to get to the center of the island, Robin said. Which means that even if we explored a section of the island one day at a time around the entire surface, we still wouldn't be able to see what's in the center. And why do I get the feeling that where we need to go is the center of the island? Frankie said with a sigh. Well, we don't know that for sure, Robin said. I do not fear cold, Brook said in his best thespian voice. I have no flesh, so I am immune to weather complications. I could go further into the island and scout ahead. But what if something happens to you? Chopper said worriedly. If you went by yourself, you could be attacked and none of us would be able to help you. Oh, it is true that my bones are not as strong as they used to be, Brook said dejectedly. Oh, the humanity. Everyone, Nami nearly shouted. The others all fell silent and looked at their red-headed navigator. I understand that it's dangerous, she began. But I have to go, no matter what. If Nezuko is here, then she doesn't have a lot of time. And we've already spent so much time getting here. I have to go, but please don't feel obligated to come with me. If one of you got hurt or died, I would never forgive myself. She was on the brink of tears but managed to hold them back. Nami? Luffy said with a frown. After all we've been through together, you still don't trust us? What? Nami said in surprise. We're all strong, Luffy said. There's no way we would die here. Luffy's right, Zoro said. If the weather's all there is to worry about, this should be a piece of cake. Speak for yourself, Usopp interjected quickly. Maybe if normal people were here, they wouldn't be able to make it to the center of the island, but we're not normal, Sanji said with grin. Speak for yourself. Usopp interjected again. It was true that among the crew, the only normal human beings were Usopp and Nami. You guys, Nami said. I don't doubt our ability to survive, Chopper said. I just want us to prepare for the trip. Let's pack appropriately, Robin said. I think the best way to go about exploring the island is if we split up into 3 groups. That way we'd be able to cover more ground in less time, but still be safe. Right, Luffy said. Zoro, Chopper, Usopp, you head to the left. Sanji, Robin, Brook, you head to the right. Frankie, you stay here with the ship. Nami and I will head for the center. Wait, there's only TT2 in your group, Usopp said, stating the obvious. Don't worry, I won't let anything happen to Nami, Luffy said with a laugh. After all, I am the Pirate King, ha ha ha. All right, then, Zoro said with one of his smiles that indicated that he was going to enjoy a challenge. We should get going. Remember, you guys have to get back here by sundown or you might freeze, Frankie warned. Aye, everyone said in unison. Everyone, please be careful, Nami said. Don't worry about me, Nami Swan, Sanji said. I will find and rescue your beloved sister. Plus, I'm a reindeer, so I'm used to cold weather, Chopper said with a laugh. And Brook isn't afraid of the cold either, so both of our groups are good to go. You're the one who needs to be the most careful, Robin said to Nami. Yeah, make sure Luffy doesn't do something stupid like that, Zoro said, pointing at their captain who was already stuck neck deep in the snow. Oi, Nami, get me out, it's cold, Luffy shouted. Nami sighed. Yeah, you guys are right. My group is the one that I should be most worried about. A few minutes later, everyone had their snowshoes or skis on and they went their separate ways. Discovery. Nami, Luffy called out. The wind and snow flurries were picking up, so it was beginning to get hard to see and hear. Luffy, Nami yelled in response. What's wrong? I found something, he called again. Nami squinted through the falling snow and saw her captain crouched over something on the ground. "What is it?" she asked in alarm as she rushed over to him as fast as she could. She crouched next to him trying to see what he had found. "Isn't it so cool?" Luffy said with a broad smile. He was poking at what looked like an insect, but it had a clear body so they could see right through it. "A bug?" Nami asked in disbelief. "Ow!" Luffy yelped after receiving a bonk on the head from his partner. "What was that for?" "We don't have time to be fooling around," Nami yelled. "Not every single little thing that moves is important to what we're doing here." Luffy just smiled and patted her head, making her turn red in the face with more anger. He had stopped them at least 20 times now in their trek toward the center of the island, and each time was for something completely unrelated to what they were supposedly trying to accomplish. But since there was really nothing else besides snow and ice as far as the eye could see, every little thing that moved was a huge distraction for Luffy. "Geez," Nami said, standing up again. She pulled out the map. "Okay, we're a few miles in." She traced their path with a mittened hand. "That's hopefully a little more than halfway to the center, but we haven't seen anything." "That's not true," Luffy said, standing as well. "We found this little guy." He held up the insect. Nami punched him in the head again and went back to the map. "There has to be more instructions than just getting us to the island. I mean, how are we supposed to find anything in this damn blizzard?" She pulled out the pendant that Robin had given back to her to hold on to. "Ow, ow, ow," Luffy whined in the background, rubbing his head. Nami ignored him and studied the pendant again. If there was that tiny etching of the island hidden in the sea, then maybe something was also hidden in the sun. Although Chopper and Robin had both looked it over, they hadn't found anything, but Nami had a feeling that something was there regardless. She took out her magnifying glass and peered down at the small pendant. "What are you looking at, Nami?" Luffy asked, also leaning in to see. "Another cool bug." "There has to be more than just the island map," Nami said, ignoring Luffy's question. "We could be stuck here looking for weeks without finding anything. It just doesn't make sense." "Oh, not a bug. There's no way someone could survive here for a month without some sort of shelter, but I don't see anything except flat ice." Nami continued, talking more to herself than to distracted her captain. "How could Nezuko be here?" "Maybe they're underground," Luffy said, putting his hands behind his head, now bored again. "Really, under the ice?" Nami said sarcastically, but after a moment she raised an eyebrow. "Wait, Luffy, I think you might be right." "So you think they're cool too, huh?" Luffy said, shoving the insect into Nami's face with glee. Nami resisted the urge to give Luffy another bump on his head and instead shoved his hand away. "No, about Nezuko being underground. Stop getting distracted, Luffy." He. "Because although this looks like an iceberg, it's really an island. All the books and maps we've found said it was. Plus that's the only logical way anyone would survive here since it's so flat." The snow began to lighten up, and miraculously the sun started to shine through the clouds. "Oh ho ho," Luffy said, looking up in the sky. "The sun came out." "Don't look directly at the sun, idiot," Nami shouted. She put away the pendant and the map. "Okay, so there has to be an entrance somewhere. Maybe we've been looking all in the wrong places. Maybe the entrance is somewhere along the coast." "Huh? Well, then Zoro, Sanji and the others should be able to find it," Luffy said confidently. "But we can't be sure there is an entrance. I mean, we're just speculating here," Nami said doubtfully. "Well, if there's no entrance, we can just make one," Luffy said, making a fist. Luffy? Stand back. Nami, don't tell me you're going to punch through the gum pistol," Luffy yelled before Nami could stop him. As his fist crashed into the ground, the layers and layers of snow poofed out around and above them. "Ah!" Nami screamed as she was blown back by the impact. Gum Gatling gun. This time Nami had time to run a little ways away from her rampaging captain. "Geez, you could have given me more time to get away," Nami yelled. The snow was still settling when Luffy hit the ground below the ice. "All right," he yelled happily. "I broke through the ice." Nami dusted herself off and cautiously approached Luffy, who was at the bottom of a huge pit. He had punched through at least half a mile of snow and ice to get to the ground. "Luffy," she called from above. "Oi, Nami," Luffy called back, waving his arms. "Stay up there for a bit longer, okay?" "Oh okay," Nami said, immediately stepping back to take cover. Gum hammer. Luffy shouted as he unleashed a powerful downward kick. Even the frozen ground didn't stand a chance against his attacks. A moment later, after the dust had settled, Nami peered over the edge of the crater. "Luffy," she called. No response. Now she was worried. What if he had gone too deep and the walls of the crater collapsed in on him? It was still too cloudy to see. "Nami," Luffy's voice echoed up to her. "Luffy?" She began to make out the image of her captain as he climbed out of the hole by slingshotting himself up the side. "Don't scare me like that." "Sorry," Luffy said with a cheeky grin. "There's a river down there." "A river?" He nodded. "And it's a lot warmer too." So Luffy had been right to think that inhabitants of this island, if any, all lived underground. Nami wondered why she hadn't thought of it first. "Let's go," Luffy said, and without warning he wrapped his rubber arm around Nami's waist and jumped down the crater. "Ah!" Nami screamed. Even though he had done this to her a number of times before, she still hadn't gotten used to it. In fact, she'd probably never be used to it. A minute later, they had reached the underground river. "Yay, we're here," Luffy announced, raising his arms in victory. Nami didn't respond immediately as she was still recovering from the long jump down by trying to keep herself from throwing up. "Oi, Nami, are you okay?" Luffy asked, poking her in the forehead. After several deep breaths, Nami finally opened her eyes and smacked his finger away. "I'm fine," she said sarcastically. "Just a mile-long drop. No harm done." "Great. Then what are we waiting for?" Luffy said happily as he marched off. "Wait, Luffy. Where do you think you're going?" "Dunno." Nami smacked her own forehead out of frustration. "Then don't just march off in any direction you feel like." She pulled out the map and looked up through the hole in the cave ceiling that Luffy had created. She was lucky the blizzard had stopped so she could estimate where they were from the sun. "Okay. We were headed in this direction when we were up there," she said, pointing one way. "But since it's already past midday, we should probably head back. The river seems to be flowing in towards the center, so we just need to follow it upstream. There'll probably be an opening of some kind once we reach the coast." "Sounds good," Luffy said. "If we can find our way out from underground, then tomorrow we'll be able to make it even further into the island since we won't have to deal with the blizzard," Nami said, a small smile crossing her face. Luffy's own smile broadened at the sight of hers. "That's more like it," he said, slapping her on the back. "See? I'll always be the one to make you smile. You're too serious." Nami raised an eyebrow and pushed Luffy's face out of her way. "Only because you're never serious at all." Luffy laughed heartily. "Let's get going, where's found?" Nami said, nodding her head. The two began their journey back to the ship in a much more comfortable climate. It was already after sundown by the time they got back. The river that they had followed did eventually lead them out to the coast. But Luffy had to smash through some rock before the hole was big enough for them to exit without having to swim against the icy current of the river. When they finally did get outside, the Thousand Sunny was within sight. Luck seemed to be on their side. "Nami Swan!" Sanji shouted for joy at the sight of their return. "Are you all right? You're not hurt, are you? I was so worried because it's already after sundown. I wanted to go after you to save you." "Sanji-kun, I'm fine," Nami said with a nervous laugh. "Luffy and I found an underground river to follow back to the coast, so it was warmer than up on the surface." "Underground river?" Chopper asked. "We didn't see anything like that." "But then again, we weren't exactly digging or anything," Usopp said. "All we did was follow the coast, but we didn't see any caves." "There was a strange water pattern at that one place, though," Chopper said, putting a hoof under his chin. "Maybe that was also the beginnings of another underground river." "We saw something similar as well," Robin said. "Looks like there are multiple rivers flowing in towards the center of the island." "But isn't that strange?" Frankie asked. "Don't rivers usually flow out to sea?" "That's right," Brooke said. "I dare say it is quite the mystery, is it not? Yo-ho-ho. If there are rivers flowing into the island, then where do they empty?" Frankie continued. "It's impossible to think that these rivers can just keep building up in the center of the island." "You're right, Frankie," Chopper said. "The island would explode or something." "I know that you weren't able to see anything on the sun before," Nami said, bringing the pendant back out. "But I just can't help but feel that there's something there that has to do with the rivers." "What do you mean?" Robin asked. "I mean, look at the pattern of the sun," Nami said, pointing to it. Each of the rays might be a river leading to the center of the island. Maybe, Frankie said. If that's the case, then I was right when I said that what we're looking for is in the center of the island. Wow, you knew all along? Chopper asked in amazement. Hey, no, things just always turn out that way. How many rays are there, Nami? Robin asked. 7. Robin said, putting a hand under her chin. How far was the strange water pattern from here, Chopper? Maybe 6 miles. Ours was a little more, maybe 6.5, Sanji said. The one we came out of was only about a quarter mile away from here, Nami said, pointing in the same direction that Robin, Sanji, and Brooks' group had gone in. It looks like the rivers are all equidistant from each other, Robin said after a quick calculation in her head. So if there really are 7 rivers like the 7 rays on this sun, then the island should be about 44 miles in circumference, meaning the center is only 7 miles away. Chopper, Usopp, and Luffy all stared at Robin in admiration. Amazing. That's my Robin Schwan for you, Sanji swooned. That is only if Nami's theory is correct about the pendant, Robin said after nodding to her adoring fans. 7 miles isn't that far, Zoro said. Tomorrow we'd definitely be able to make it there and back. Well, only if we go underground, Nami said. Yeah, we were making really slow progress today when we tried to get to the center, Luffy said. That's because you kept getting distracted, Nami shouted in anger. Scary. Luffy yelped and hid behind Chopper. In any case, I think there's a good chance that my theory is right, Nami said after calming down. Well, we should all eat something, and then you guys need to rest, Frankie said. I can keep watch since I didn't have much to do today besides fix up some things. Okay, then I'll go cook dinner, Sanji said, walking off to the kitchen. Food. Luffy yelled out of happiness. Sanji, make sure to make lots of meat. Got it, Sanji replied without turning. Luffy always asked him to make lots of meat dishes every single meal, so Sanji was planning on it anyway. All right, Luffy said and punched the air. Good, I'm starving, Zoro said and sat down to take a nap before the meal. Me too, Chopper said. I can't wait for dinner. Me three. Usopp agreed and the two of them began to dance happily around the deck singing about food. Brook couldn't help but join in as he whipped out his fiddle, and Luffy also began doing the food dance. With all the men of the ship doing their daily before meal routines, Robin and Nami settled down at their table. I hope your instinct is right, Nami, Robin said. 7 miles isn't too far, but if something happens and we're unable to get back to the ship in time, it could be dangerous. I know, Nami said with a nod. I don't want to put people in danger, but I just can't shake this feeling. If you feel that strongly about it, then I trust you, Robin said with a smile. Your instincts are quite dependable. I've never met anyone with your ability to navigate, draw maps or predict weather patterns like you can. You have a very special gift. That made Nami feel much better. She looked up to Robin a hell of a lot, and anytime Robin said something, Nami knew that it was the truth. The tunnel. At the crack of dawn, the Straw Hats were ready to start their journey to the center of the island. If Nami's theory was correct, then there was no need to explore the rest of the coast, and as far as Nami could tell, there was nothing of interest on the surface. What about the cool bugs? Luffy asked. Bugs? Chopper asked, completely confused. Nami squeezed the map she had just rolled shut, crinkling the paper. Luffy, will you drop that already? She shouted. Hey, everyone, Usopp shouted from his post in the crow's nest. What's up, Usopp? Luffy shouted back. The long-nosed sharpshooter was looking through his binoculars out at the ocean. You're not gonna believe this. The others all looked in the direction Usopp was pointing. At first they saw nothing, but soon small, dark dots began to appear on the frozen horizon. Geez. Someone followed us all the way here? Sanji said. Looks like it, Frankie said, heading off toward the defense system room. Oi, Usopp, how many are there? I don't know, Usopp hollered back. They just keep coming. So far I'd say there are about 15 or 20 ships. 20 ships? All the way up here? Frankie wondered aloud. It's probably the Marines, Sanji said. What kind of bounty hunter has 20 ships under his command? The sun had already risen above the horizon, and Nami was getting worried. If they needed to get back to the ship by sundown, they only had a very limited amount of time to get to the center of the island, see if they could find Nijiko, and then get back. The more time they waited to get started, the less time they'd have to find her sister. Luffy seemed to notice her anxiety. Okay, guys, listen up. The rest of the crew turned their attention away from the oncoming ships to listen to their captain. If it's just the Marines, then all of us don't need to stay here. We've got to get to the center of the island as soon as possible. Right, Zoro said. It's a whole fleet of Marines. Usopp yelled as he made his way down from the nest. There are at least 50 ships. Luffy, Zoro said upon hearing the new information. You, Robin, Chopper, Brook, and Nami go find Nejico. The rest of us can handle these idiots. Are you sure? Nami asked worriedly. I know they're just the Marines, but this is a huge fleet. No problem, Frankie said coming back out of the defense room. I designed this ship to hold its own against a fleet of 100, so what's 50 ships? We'll be fine, Nami-san, Sanji said with determination. Please leave everything to me. Hey, guys, we'd better hurry. Usopp interrupted. They've got some sort of device that's letting them plow through the ice too. Okay, let's go, Luffy said with a nod. See you at sundown, Frankie said with a salute. The exploration group nodded and quickly left the ship. These guys must be real idiots to think they can corner us up here, Zoro said crossing his arms. They probably thought we'd be stuck in the ice and are trying to ambush us, Frankie said with a gleeful smile. Just who do they think they're dealing with? We've got other business we need to take care of, Sanji growled. We should finish them quickly. Well, in that case, you guys just go ahead, Usopp said with a nervous laugh. I'll back you up from here. The other three looked over at their comrade and saw that he was half inside the main cabin with his knees practically knocking together. What? You're still afraid of these guys? Zoro mocked. And no, Usopp insisted, but you didn't see their sails. What about them? Zoro asked. They're the infamous Fleet Number 7, Usopp said, his voice jumping an octave or two. 7, Sanji said. What about it? What? You've never heard of Fleet Number 7? Usopp shouted, his jaw dropping to the ground. I have, Frankie said. What the hell are they doing outside the Grand Line? They're probably here just to hunt us down, Usopp said nervously. We were lucky enough to outrun them in the Grand Line, but here we're completely stuck, and Nami's not here to help us out-navigate them. Oh, please, Sanji said as he lit a cigarette. We've dealt with things much worse than any damn marine fleet. They say that the man heading up the 7th Fleet has a devil fruit power, Frankie said, putting a hand under his chin. Although, according to rumors, he's never actually been seen using it, because his fleet has always taken care of things without him having to fight. Even in the Grand Line? Sanji asked. Then this'll be at least a little entertaining, Zoro said with a menacing smile. Luffy, Nami, Robin, Chopper, and Brook made it to the entrance of the cave that Luffy had made the day before. A bad blizzard was beginning to pick up, so they were grateful for the shelter. Oh, I hope Zoro, Sanji, Usopp, and Frankie are okay, Chopper said worriedly. This storm looks worse than yesterday's. Maybe it'll be a good thing, Robin offered. This also means the Marines will have a harder time getting closer. It'll at least buy them more time to prepare the ship. Really? Asked the small reindeer hopefully. Robin nodded and gave him an encouraging smile. Besides, those guys can handle themselves, Luffy said confidently. I mean, come on, we're the Straw Hat Pirates. I guess you're right, Chopper said with a laugh. In any case, we should hurry, Nami said, interrupting. I would just like to say that this cave reminds me of a song that my comrades and I once sang so very long ago, Brook sang. Really? Let's hear it, Luffy said, always up for a good song. Of course. Brook whipped out his guitar from seemingly nowhere and began to sing. At first Nami wanted to retort and tell them to shut it, but then she looked at her companions and realized that the music was helping to make the cave less gloomy. Every one of them was smiling as they listened to Brook's performance, seeming to forget the cold and worry that they had just had a second ago. Eventually, Nami also joined in on the music making. It was a pretty uneventful journey to the center of the island, so Brook's music livened it up. Having fun and being carefree while walking towards the unknown was the epitome of being a pirate. A while later, the group came to a halt. In front of them was what looked like the gate of a fortress. I knew there'd be people underground, Luffy said happily. Looks like the walls of a city, Robin observed. A whole city? Chopper said in amazement. Yo-ho-ho? I've never heard of an underground city up here before, Brook said. I shall be the first to write a song about it. But the gate's closed, Nami said. Then let's knock, Luffy said as if it were the most logical thing in the world. He walked up to the gate and pounded his fist on the cold metal. Hello? He shouted. His voice echoed through the cave, even causing a few loose rocks to fall from the walls and ceiling. Huh, looks like no one's home, Luffy said. Well, if they're not going to let us in, I'll just break it down. That might not be the best idea, Robin warned just as Luffy was winding up for a punch. Why not? He asked. Think about it, Robin said patiently. We're under at least a mile or so of rock, ice, and snow. Although the island may seem flat, we should assume that the center is more elevated than the coasts. So, Luffy said, completely missing the point. So, we shouldn't be too rash about pummeling our way through this gate, Nami said impatiently. She didn't know how Robin managed to keep her cool when dealing with Luffy. That was definitely one thing that Nami really admired about her. I get it, Chopper said. The wall is probably made to hold up the weight of the rock and ice on it. If we punch out the gate, the whole thing might collapse on us. That's right, Chopper, Robin said with a smile. Ah, that's boring, Luffy pouted. Then how are we supposed to get in? Robin said, deep in thought. I'll try opening the gate. She took a deep breath and proceeded to project her devil fruit arms through the gate. Suddenly shush pain. What's wrong, Robin? Nami asked worriedly. It seems I've hit some sort of barrier, Robin said with a puzzled look on her face. For some reason I can't get past it. That's weird, Luffy said. Then what do we do? Chopper asked. Brook said, trying to think. Well, the river seems able to get in. Nami's eyes brightened. That's it, Brook. What's it, my dear? Brook asked. If I can just swim under the wall, then I can open the gate for you guys. What? Luffy, Robin, and Brook said in unison. Are you crazy? Chopper said, waving his arms. It's still freezing here. You could get hypothermia. Don't worry, Nami said, taking off her bag that held the map, the pendant, and her weapon that Usopp had made her. The Klima tact. I'm a really good swimmer. That's not what I'm saying, Chopper said, shaking his head. Good swimmer or not, anyone could get hypothermia if they jumped into freezing cold water. Nami, don't be hasty, Robin warned. Come on, guys, Nami said. All of you have eaten some sort of devil fruit, so I'm the only one who can swim. The others had to agree with that. Plus, we're just wasting time here, Nami continued. Nezuko is being held prisoner in there, and there's no other way in without collapsing the whole island on us. She took off her coat and shoes. It was cold, but not nearly as cold as up on the surface. Nami, you don't even know how thick this wall is, Chopper said, waving his arms again. What if you get stuck under there? Nami smiled. Luffy'll pull me out, huh? Me? Luffy asked, pointing to himself. Yeah, Nami said. She then pulled on Luffy's rubber arm and quickly wrapped it around her waist. Oh, I get it, Luffy said with a laugh. Are you sure about this? Robin asked. I'm sure, Nami said confidently. If I need to be pulled back, I'll just tap his arm. The others all looked to their captain for his input. He looked from one person to the other and finally to Nami. He saw the determination in her eyes, making him smile. Let's do it, he said with a nod. Luffy, Chopper began to say. I trust Nami, Luffy cut him off. She can do it. Nami couldn't help but feel touched at her captain's statement. She nodded. I won't let you guys down. In that case, Brook said. You might want to take off the rest of your outer clothing, my dear. Then I can finally see your panties. Nami immediately punched the skeleton in the head. You three will see no such thing, she declared. Robin couldn't help but chuckle a little. All right, then, she said, and used 3 pairs of devil fruit hands to cover Luffy's, Brook's, and Chopper's eyes. Nami nodded thanks to Robin and then took off her outer shirt and pants, leaving her in her white undershirt and leggings. It would be cold, but having extra clothes on her would increase the drag underwater. She took a deep breath and dove in. A mysterious barrier. The icy water hit Nami like a barrage of knives, causing her to lose a little bit of the air she had taken in. She felt her extremities numb almost immediately, and then the lack of feeling began to creep up her arms and legs. She shook her head underwater, trying to concentrate, and she willed herself to move. The river current added to her progress and she swam swiftly under the wall, but the cold was almost unbearable. Although her willpower was strong, It couldn't stop the fact that her arms and legs began to feel heavy like lead, and she began seeing spots. Her heart rate was dropping and she was losing consciousness. No, she screamed at herself. Ijiko was waiting for her on the other side and this was the only way in. She would never forgive herself if she failed now. Just when she felt like she couldn't go on any longer, the water around her suddenly changed. The intense coldness started to wane, and feeling began to course back into her limbs. She saw a bright light up ahead, almost like the sun soon. The water was very much warmer than it had been a few seconds ago. Nami could hardly believe it. It was then she felt Luffy's arm around her waist loosen. He seemed to be losing his grip on her. Suddenly, she felt the rubber arm snap back around her and she was no longer connected to her lifeline. What had happened? Now there was really no turning back. With new feeling in her body, Nami pushed her lungs to their limits as she swam towards the bright light. The cold was not the issue anymore. It was air. She felt her lungs scream at her for oxygen but she mentally yelled at them to shut it as she tried to concentrate on swimming forward. Finally, she saw that the dark shadow of the wall ended just in front of her and she began to swim up towards the light. Her head broke through the surface, and she gasped for the much-needed oxygen. Air had never tasted so good. She treaded water for a minute to catch her breath and only then did she begin to take notice of her surroundings. The sun? She looked up. The ceiling of rock she had expected was not there. Instead, a vast sky with clouds and all met her gaze. She swam over to the riverbank and pulled herself out of the water. Her hands touched grass. Nami looked around her. She seemed to be at the edge of a vast field of wild grass, flowers, and trees, and it was warm. How is this possible? She looked back at the wall she had just swum under and saw the gate. Quickly pushing her shock and wonder of the scene before her out of her mind, she ran over to the gate and found it to be wheel-operated. She quickly tried turning the wheel, but only after exerting all her strength did it begin to budge. Luckily, once she had started it moving, the wheel spun all on its own. The gate began to open. Nami expected a rush of cold air to meet her upon the opening of the gate but she felt nothing. What is going on here? She said out loud. After the gate had opened completely, she could only see a dark tunnel that went through the wall. She assumed that the gate on the other side had opened as well. Hey! Are you guys there? She yelled to see if her friends had made it through. Nami, she heard Luffy's voice echo through the tunnel. A smile broke on Nami's face, and she began to run down the tunnel toward her friends. I did it, guys, she called. As she got closer to the middle of the tunnel, she slowed to a walk. Her friends were there but for some reason they weren't going past a certain point. Guys, she said with a laugh. I opened the gate, what's the hold up? Nami, Chopper said shakily as he pointed down. Nami's gaze followed. What she saw made her scream, Brook. A pile of bones and clothing were all that was left of their musician. WHWH, what happened? Nami stuttered. Brook wanted to run ahead so that he could take a look at your panties before the rest of us got there. Luffy explained with a laugh. He seemed completely nonchalant about the whole thing. How can you be so calm about this? Nami yelled at him. He ate the revived fruit, Luffy said with a shrug. He can't die. Look at him. Nami shouted, pointing a finger at the bones. How can you say that when this is what he looks like? Wait, Nami, Robin said calmly. Would you mind pushing Brook back over here? Huh? Nami asked in confusion. I have a theory that I want to confirm, Robin stated simply. Okay, Nami said and did what she was told. A shiver ran down her spine upon touching the pile of bones that was once Brook. When Brook was a walking, talking skeleton, she had had no qualms about hugging or punching him, but now that he was dead, really dead, she couldn't help but feel slightly uncomfortable touching the bones. Once Nami had pushed Brook past a certain point, the pile of bones began to shake. Then suddenly Brook's spirit came rushing in out of nowhere, and the bones stacked themselves back up into their original shape. Ah! Nami screamed. Ah! Chopper screamed simultaneously. So cool, Luffy screamed with his eyes bugging out. Robin was the only one who remained a silent observer of the bizarre scene in front of them. Oh, my, Brook said once he had completely put himself back together. You've all caught me stark naked. He dramatically covered up his chest and his pelvis area with his bony hands. Don't worry, Brook, Robin said with a smile, we can't see anything. Oh, yes. That's right, my dear, Yo ho 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 ho, Brook said with a hearty laugh. I'm only a skeleton after all. He picked up his clothes and put them on. What just happened here? Chopper squealed, still completely shaken. You weren't moving a second ago. See, I told you he's not dead, Luffy said, slapping Chopper on the back with glee. I can't die, Brook said, because I am already dead. Robin, Nami said, observing that the dark-haired woman was deep in thought. What's going on? It's as I thought, Robin said. When I used my devil fruit arms to try and go through this tunnel, I couldn't get past this point. There was something that prevented me from passing. And now we know that Luffy's rubber arm and Brook's spirit can't get past this point either. There must be some sort of barrier that protects whatever's on the other side of this tunnel from devil fruit users. How is that possible? Nami asked. It makes sense when you think about it, Robin continued. The only ways to get past the wall were to go through this tunnel or swim under the wall like you did. Devil fruit users can't swim, so that isn't a viable option, and the barrier here seems to take away any special power a devil fruit user has. Does that mean we can't cross? Luffy asked in alarm. Will we all die like Brook? Chopper asked shakily, almost at the point of freaking out completely. Robin shook her head. I don't think so, she said. I think that the only reason why Brook's spirit left him was because the revived fruit's power eternalizes his spirit and not his body. I'm guessing that if, say you, Chopper, were to cross this point, you'd lose your ability to act and think like a human. Really? Chopper asked in amazement. But as we just saw here, if we come back to this side of the tunnel, our powers return to us, Robin concluded. Luffy said and immediately stepped over the boundary. Luffy! Nami and Chopper yelled in alarm. Luffy patted his chest and looked at his body. I don't feel any different, he said with a shrug. Try stretching your arm, Robin instructed. Luffy nodded and wound up his arm for a stretch. To his utter amazement, his arm remained its normal length. Wah! He cried in astonishment. Were you even listening to what Robin was saying? Nami shouted. So, it's true then, Chopper said to Robin. If you and Luffy go past this point, you guys will just lose your abilities to stretch and make devil fruit arms. If Brook goes past, he'll lose his spirit. If I go past, I'll turn back into a wild animal. Isn't that right? Unfortunately, yes, Robin said. Maybe the best option is to have you and Brook go back to the Hers out. We don't know how they're holding up against the Marines. But what about the three of you? Brook asked. Is it safe for you to keep going without your devil fruit powers? Suddenly a clinking noise echoed through the tunnel. What's that? Chopper asked in alarm. Nami looked back towards the gate she had opened. The gates are closing, she gasped. We have no choice, Luffy said. Robin, Nami, let's go. Brook, Chopper. You guys head back to the Thousand Sunny. We'll be back. Oh okay, Chopper said with a nod. He transformed himself into his running form. Brook, get on, right away. My noble steed, Brook said and hopped onto Chopper's back. You guys had better come back, Chopper yelled at the other three. We will, Luffy said with a laugh. Don't worry about us, Nami said. Help the others, Robin said. Chopper nodded and then galloped off towards the quickly closing gate while Luffy, Robin, and Nami sprinted towards the opposite gate.